Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Eric Miron. Eric is also known as Dad Bod. He's a performance artist. He's a singer. If you follow me on social media, I may have done a reel with one of his tunes. He's also an actor. He and I met on set. We have a film together coming out. We got to act together in a scene. It was so much fun. It's called Armchair Traveler, and it's coming out, fingers crossed, hopefully soon. Oh, he has an incredible story to tell. As soon as I met this guy, we were up sitting in our little, green room. I was like, I have to have this guy on my podcast. He is absolutely fabulous. He's so talented at everything he does, and he has such a wonderful creative career and passions and enthusiasm for life. And he's a hella talented actor. Please enjoy Eric Dad Bod Miron. Pressure's on now. Pressure's on. You know what I realized this morning when I was getting my ritual ready? You are the first person that I've talked to on my podcast who I've filmed a scene with for an actual project.
No way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's like a milestone.
I think so. I know
it.
so. I mean, there's people I've talked to that I've been in like an acting class with, or like I've been in a play with, but I was like, Eric's the first person who I've been in a legitimate scene on a movie set together.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's awesome. So yeah, tell me your story. How in the blue blazes did you get in? How did you get to the film set that you and I got to be on together?
Oh wow, yeah, that's a long story. Well, it all started back in 1985. Yeah,
it was a cold and rainy day.
Yeah. No, it's getting into acting, I guess you're asking, is just how I started.
Yeah, or even just the story of your creativity, because you have a lot of really interesting stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, I was a music teacher for 10 years in elementary schools. So I went to the University for Music and Acting, and I really enjoyed acting, but I didn't want to do any acting. I was like, no, I'm too nervous. I can't get on stage. You kidding me? I'm just gonna watch, learn the craft, see how it's done, and then sit back. I don't want to do it. So then I kind of figured, I guess I'm not really an actor. I'm a teacher. Those who can't do, they teach. So I'm going to go and teach. I did that for 10 years. I didn't do a lot of teaching. Like I didn't do a lot of drama teaching. It was more music. But there was always something in the back of my mind that was like, yeah, like you want to do this, go try out. So I did some background stuff for Letterkenny a few times. I really enjoyed it. And then I did, an actual part in a French movie called LA Switch or La Switch. And in it, I had to get beat up by Francois Arnault, who was the lead in that movie. And I had to do like the stunt training for a day. And I was like, this is amazing. Like I went to a gym and the whole day I just like rolled around and got choked out and learned how to fall. And I was like, this is great. So I did that film. The next day I went and shot that and I loved it. Even though I poked the lead in the eye, like getting ready for the scene we were practicing, and I put my hand out and I didn't do it right, and I got him right in the eye with my thumb, and he freaked out, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get fired right here. I'm done. But it all went well, and then he kind of roughed me up pretty good. I had like scrapes on my face and stuff too because we were so into it, but it turned out awesome. And then I just loved it. I was like, I need to do more of this, but not background stuff. I want to be in the mix, I don't want to just sit there and wait and then go be in the background. And then nothing happened for a while. And then finally I got a job on it was an animated feature film. And I played a guy named Jude who just went through a breakup, and I had just went through a breakup. And I was just like, I was really enjoying the process of making this. I went to the studio and we did all the dialogue for that and the ADR for that. And I was like, this is fantastic. I love this. I got paid really good money for it. And that was it. I was like, okay, I need to get into ACTRA. And then I started auditioning and I got an agent. And Ended up with Armchair Traveler, which is really, really fun. My first probably my biggest role. And then we got to work together, which was awesome. Yeah, that was it. And now, just haven't auditioned in a while, but I'm hoping to get something else. I'm writing a script because I'd like to, again, I want to take it up a notch. Like I've been like a day player and I've done little scenes back like here and there, but I want to be a lead and I want to have like an actual project that I'm kind of creating and working on and having a hand in telling that story, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of my journey.
Take me back to when you were in your university studying music and acting and you weren't keen on the acting part. What changed? Tell me more about that.
Okay, so I think when I was, so I mentioned I had taught for 10 years. When I was in my teaching profession, I had given up on acting because of that. Like I felt nervous. I felt like I wasn't very confident. And I think that's why I got into teaching initially, is because I wasn't ready to like go out into the real world. I wanted to stay where I felt safe, which was in school where I'd been for all this time. And when I was 29, my grandpa died, and I was really close with him. And when it happened, it was like this shock, this awakening of like, whoa, like life, people die, like you die, you're gonna die, dude. And then it just kind of like hit me. And at the same time, I had my first daughter who was born with a cleft palate, and it's something called Pierre-Robin sequence. So the whole pregnancy was great. We were like, this is going to be fantastic. We're going to be parents. And then this happened. It was such a shock. And then 2 weeks later, my grandpa died. And it was like the entire universe was like sending me this message of like, life is short. Like anything can happen. What do you want to do with your life? And then I always felt like acting was something I wanted to do in movies. I didn't want to be on stage. That to me is petrifying. I don't know how people do it. I would forget my lines. Like you saw me, I probably forgot a million lines when we were shooting. So finally, I told myself, like, if you want to do this, go and do it. Don't wait and regret. Regret's the worst. I don't want to be 85 thinking like, oh man, I should have tried that. Like, no, do it. And if I fall on my face and I fail, at least I could say that I tried it. And luckily, and then I decided, okay, I'll do background stuff for Letterkenny. And from there, it kind of snowballed, like I said. But that was it. I think my grandpa passing and my daughter being born with that, which is not a big deal. Like she had a palate repair. She doesn't have that sequence as bad as other children have had it. So she's fine. Everything's fine. Knock on wood. We're all happy. Everyone's happy. But at that moment, being a 28-year-old man, but really I was still a kid, a 29-year-old kid, it was kind of like the world shook, and I was like, okay, wow, I'm awake now. Now I got to do this. I'm not going to live forever. Things aren't just going to fall in my lap. I have to go out and work for it. I have to go and try things and get uncomfortable and challenge myself. And that's what I've been doing ever since. It's been about 7 years now, 8 years. My daughter's 8. So yeah.
I think that's true for a lot of people. I think, and it's funny, I was chatting with someone yesterday who we were talking about sitcom tropes. And he was like, isn't it funny how, like, in every sitcom, the characters who are in their late 20s, early 30s, what makes them funny is the fact that their life is falling apart. Right. And it's funny because I'm like, yeah, that's like the nexus for my entire podcast is there's something that happens, and it happens at a lot of different stages in people's life, and it doesn't have to be some huge thing, but sometimes it is a huge thing that you were saying just shakes the very fiber of who we are, because I think a lot of us, especially here in Canada, don't have a lot of like shaking that can happen, and so when it does, it's very startling, right. If you kind of catch my drift.
We're very lucky in Canada where things are they're easy. Life is easy, relatively easy for us here. And like, totally get it, because if we were to live in another country, somewhere like a third world country or in South America or something, like trauma and these crazy things that are going on around us happened all the time. Here in Canada, we're kind of lucky. Everything's easy. We just get up, we go to work, and especially us, like being white people in Canada, we're like, we hit the jackpot. Like nothing's hard relatively to everyone else. So it's easy for us to fall into this comfortable lifestyle where it's like, well, I go to work and I make my minimum wage and I buy my quad and I have my house and I have my camp and my trailer. And that's fine if that's what you want. But for me, it was like, I can't do that. That's not going to be enough for my soul. Like it'll tear me apart. And I didn't really know what it was, if it was music or acting. I just knew that like doing something like that was calling me. And at that point, when I was shaken, the voice that was calling me got real loud. It was like, hey, do it, go. So yeah.
Were you always pretty creative growing up? And was there a positive pressure to keep being creative growing up? Or did you get subjected, as a lot of us did, to the well-meaning but negative pressure saying, yeah, you're talented, but maybe go do something more stable?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know?
100%. I always thought, and I think that was it. I thought I was creative, but I think everyone around me is like, yeah, that's great, but like, you know, you're not like that special creative. You know what I mean? Not in those words, but that's almost a sentiment, and they were trying to be nice about it. But and I can remember as a kid, I used to like, I had this old guitar I didn't know how to play, but I would just like do patterns with the open strings, and I would play these little tunes for my mom, and she'd be like, oh, great job. And I remember loving it, but there was never a push to like, let's put them in guitar. It was just kind of like, cool, you do that. That's great. But where we live and where we are, that's not really a future or possibility. Like I live in Sudbury, in Northern Ontario, especially back when we were kids. There was no arts out here. There was really nothing. It was kind of just like you work in the mines, and you know, or that's it. Or you teach the people, the kids of the people that work in the mine, or you serve the people that work in the mine. Like that's kind of, we're in a mining town, right? So my family was always like super supportive of what I was doing, but it was always like, it's a hobby, and that's kind of what it's going to be. And when I was 15, I started a band, and I loved it. And we did that for like, I think 9 years we were in that band. And throughout that entire time, I would spend countless, like Saturday mornings, I remember I would get up and spend the entire day from like 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. in my room with a guitar trying to write these songs. And I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember my parents would come up, my mom would come up and see how I was doing. I'd show her these songs, and she was always like, oh, they're really cool. But it was never enough to be like, yeah, follow this. And thinking back, I thought like, well, man, if my kid was in a room for 8 hours, 10 hours a day writing a song, I think I would clue in. But back then, I think it was just more of like, don't give them the false hope of thinking this is a possibility, because it's not. Nobody gets to do that. Only the special lucky people get to do that. And as I grew up and got older, I started thinking like, well, it's definitely not going to happen if I don't at least try to do it. Like, I can't just sit back and be like, well, maybe I'll be special one day. Like, no, dude, go out, get better, write 1 million songs, get really good at it, be in 1 million movies, get really good at it, and fail a lot, and then maybe you'll have the chance to make it your career, you know? So, yeah.
How do you, what's the question I want to, how do you said, be in 1 million movies, make 1 million songs, but fail a lot. And I think for a lot of people, that is terrifying, right? The failure is terrifying. And so that would be the thing that would say, I just don't even want to try, because there is the potential of failure. And I think in the entertainment industry, it's not just a potential. It is like, it will happen.
Guaranteed, yeah.
Guaranteed. That's the word. Yeah. How do you push through that? Or is that even the right word to describe who you are as a person? How do you mindset your way through that? It's kind of been like a gradual thing. I get that. I get the idea of like, I don't want to fail. Why even try? Like, I don't want to, it's too embarrassing. It's too hard. But when I was kind of shaken awake, I think there was something inside of me that was like, just do it. Who cares? Just try it. And I started reading this book by David Goggins. Do you know who David Goggins? No.
So he's like an ultra marathon runner, but before that he was a Navy SEAL, and he'd been through a ton of stuff. And his book Can't Hurt Me is kind of his story, and how he went from being a cockroach exterminator to being a Navy SEAL. And it was just a matter of just like hardening his mind and like strengthening his mind, and not being, being okay with like falling on your face, and then switching it in your brain and changing that mindset of like, at least I did it. That person couldn't do it. I win, and that's not necessarily how I look at it, but the way that he kind of would do these mind tricks on himself, where he would, if he did something and he failed at it, he would think, well, I still did more than the person that wanted it, another person that wanted it. I actually took the step. So that's a W. Now I could take that W and put it towards the next endeavor. And the more I do that, the more I fail, the more I can switch that and make it look like I won, and then take that W and add it to my cookie jar of wins, and then that'll build my confidence. So he tried to make every failure a win, and that's what I've kind of done over the years. Is like when I fail, I think back and I go like, okay, well, what if I hadn't done it? Is it still a win? Like, where's the silver lining here? Because there's always some silver lining. You can kind of find that. You just got to switch your perspective. So I've kind of been doing that, and at first it was tough, but now I fail and I just like, I feel like shit, and I obviously feel bad and I hate myself at the time. Like when we were working on Armchair, there were some days when I'm like, I screwed the pooch on this scene. Like I don't feel good about it. But I would tell myself like, okay, maybe you didn't do well on this scene, but this entire movie, there are moments in here that you felt good about it. Lead with that, make that the thing you think about when you're feeling crappy about yourself. Don't worry about the negative. They're always going to be there. Worry about the positive. And the fact that you got to do this movie is incredible. So just focus on that. And, it's easier said than done, obviously, but it's something that I'm constantly trying to do.
As an aside, I felt very similar when we were filming that movie.
Okay.
Because there was a time I blanked on my lines and I had 5, right? It's not like I had many. And I remember there was this time when I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca, the director. I'm sorry, who's a friend of mine, right? And she was like, it's okay. Janet, we're just getting coverage. And I don't know what coverage means. I don't know what that means. I didn't go to theater school. So I was like, okay. And then I remember driving back to my hotel with Trish and being like, I screwed the pooch, like you said. I was like, I'm here for a day. I have 5 lines and I screwed it up. I'm so sorry. And Trish was like, and I'm like, I didn't even know what coverage was. She's like, Janet, this is the place and the people that you're allowed to not know around.
Right.
She's like, you're not allowed to set the set on fire, but she's like, this is the place where you're among good, supportive people where you can learn that stuff. And I think you and I both being pretty new to this industry can be terrifying. And that sensation of I screwed this up, and we go into the negative immediately and forget about the positive stuff that happened. But I never thought about that. Some of these kind of building blocks of our career, this wonderful movie we were a part of, these are the people where we can learn some of the stuff because they're so nice.
Well, especially that project, everyone was amazing. It was awesome. Yeah, I didn't know what coverage was either going in.
No.
I didn't know. Now I know, thankfully, but... Yeah. But actually, one thing that I was working on before that, the animated movie that I had done, I couldn't get the singing portion right. And the director was like, try this, try that, and I wasn't hitting it. And when I left, I was so, you're just so, hard on yourself. Fuck, I couldn't give them what they wanted. But then people told me, this is editing. This is a business of editing. What you gave them is fine. They'll find a way to make it work. That's why they're so prepared. They have the coverage and they have the shots that they need. They can edit. Don't worry about it. But as an actor and as an artist, you want to please people. I don't know about you, but I want the director to be like, great job every time. I want validation steady. And you realize too, it's well, no, you can't have that. You go in, make yourself happy, do the fucking work, get it done. Can I swear on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, do the work, do the most you can do, and then leave it there. And if you don't get validation, whatever, it is what it is. But it's so hard not to. It's so hard. You make one mistake, you're like, I'm going to dwell on this all day. I'm just going to think about this all day. It's going to mess everything up for the day. The curse of acting.
I know. And it's interesting because I think when... if I've worked on a bigger project, even just as background, watching some of the bigger name actors and then being like, oh, look, they mess lines up too. And then they just kind of go, oh, sorry. And they do it again. And I'm like, oh, good. They're just actors. They're just like the rest of us. But then I think to myself, I have not earned the ability to mess up my lines yet on set. Right? I'm not that celebrity status to be sorry, everyone around me, I messed up my lines. And they go, it's okay, Janet. No, I haven't earned that yet.
Right.
So that's when I feel even more guilty, because I'm like, no, who am I? I'm just this little day player coming in. How I have not earned the status to screw up yet.
Absolutely. I know what you mean 100%. Yeah. Because then you feel like I've now single-handedly have messed up this entire shot or this entire like moment. Mm-hmm. And maybe the other actor was into it and they were having a breakthrough or they were feeling like things were working, and then you just kind of snap everyone out, of course. Yeah. But then if you think about it from the other perspective, because that's how I try to think about it, those actors that are big, there's so much more riding on them. Like the money, the money that's been put into this production, everything rides on their performance. So if they have a bad performance, that show could suffer. So it's almost like I try to tell myself that, like, okay, you're just a small guy. You're just a small player. What's one little line that you messed up? You don't have an entire production riding on your back, which hopefully one day that's the case. But so those are little mind games I tell myself. It doesn't work, obviously, but it's something at least I'm trying to tell myself.
Yeah, I think it's part of the training, I think, right? Yeah. Which is funny because it's so personal. So I think about like the training to become pretty much any other career, right? I trained to be a doctor. You can teach anyone how to do that, right? Like, here's the science textbook, learn it. Science is science. Where this is like training your like soul and who you are as a human and your emotions and everything. Like, it's
and how
so
to tap in.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, and to be vulnerable in front of all those people and not be afraid to make a mistake, even though you're petrified to make a mistake. And like, it's just, and then being okay with like falling on your face in front of all these people, and maybe it'll be good. They might say that was perfect. And you're like, oh, fuck, I feel like I didn't do well, but it works. Like, yeah, you got to do it, I guess. You can't walk in and say, oh, I've got my theory down, I'm good. No. Get in front of the camera. Let's see if the camera likes you, because the camera can see through all your bullshit. Like it's yeah. I saw an interview with Shia LaBeouf, and he was saying how he had to like learn to love the camera, and then that made the camera love him. There was this weird like relationship he had to have with the camera, and he learned as a kid, obviously, with even Stevens. But the camera will pick up a lot more than we think. And it's about that feeling comfortable in front of it and knowing like that light's on, like you're there. People are looking up your nostrils, but you just got to forget and just be like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but the way he had mentioned it, I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's a weird kind of awareness of being solely with you and your scene partner, right? Like trying to forget the world around you, but also being cognizant of the world around you, because you're not the center of this little universe. Like there's all these other crew around that you have to be aware of. It's a weird balancey thing. It's a bizarre, surreal world.
Absolutely. And especially when they're like, okay, you got to hit your mark here. So like you got to walk here, stop here, talk, turn this way, make sure your face is this way, look over here. Now be natural and give me a moment. It's like, oh. So yeah,
and now 100%. Cry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Find that something there and just let it all out. Like, okay. But that's why they make the big bucks, the good ones. They make all that, the big money.
So take me through kind of the steps that you've done to build your career. I mean, for someone who didn't go to like traditional theater school or traditional film school, how did you learn what to do to learn how the camera works, but also the business side of this?
Well, I kind of like I knew a little bit about it because like I had taken a degree in fine arts, so I studied music, and then I did study the acting, like how to do it and like the craft of it, and a little bit of stage, how that all works. I didn't know much about film, and I just kind of like asked questions, and at first I was so green, like I would go and be background, and I would sit there quietly and just like look around and try to soak in whatever I could. But I had friends in the acting community that I went to school with who were starting to jump in and do stuff. And I would always just kind of ask them questions and they would fill me in. And then if ever I got to a point where I was like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what my next step is. I have a buddy named Richard Barlow. You've met Richard. He was on the Armchair. Yeah, Richard was already in there and he was doing a lot of big things, and I would just kind of be like, what's the next step logically? What should I do? And he would kind of point me in the right direction. So I think it's just talking to people, like just making connections was my biggest thing, and just asking questions. And that was always hard for me. Like I'm not one to like, I'm kind of a shy person. I don't really go out and chat with people, but I've been forcing myself like, okay, you got to take these, you have to go and talk. You have to go and ask questions. If you want to know this business, you got to know the business, like go and find out, you know? And there's no rule book or anything. Like you can't really just go read up on the film industry. You have to kind of just do it and like learn on the fly, like go, go, go. This is how it works. Okay. Okay. You know? Um, yeah, that's kind of how I think that was the question. I'm sorry. I might have not
No,
actually answered it.
absolutely, you did.
Okay.
Do you notice any similarities between your, not just your career in teaching and acting, but also the music that you're involved in, even now, right? Anything that you're pulling from all these experiences you've had now into your acting career?
Yeah, I think for me it's always been about storytelling. I think even whether it's music or acting, I've always like really loved the idea of telling a perspective or telling a story from a certain perspective, and like different perspectives than normally. Like I don't know about you, but I'm like a huge Game of Thrones fan.
Yeah.
And the new series, it's the same thing. It's not the same, but it's the same world, but the perspective is so different. The brutality is in this new one is it's there, but there's some love behind it, and it brings a new perspective. So I always like the idea of like telling stories in different ways. Maybe they're stories we've already heard, but trying to find different ways to tell those stories. So I try to put that in my music. I try to write my lyrics from the perspective of a character, and you know, I'm not sure how much that applies to teaching, because you know, with teaching it was just like, here's how to play an instrument, here's a clarinet, this is how you put your mouth, here's how you put your fingers. Let's try to get through this next 75 minutes here without you know, having a headache. And that might be why I left teaching, because behind that, all I ever wanted to do was just tell these stories and do it in a different way that hasn't really been done before, I guess. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone who's interested in starting to tell more stories or starting to do some acting?
If you want to do it, and I always, like, if people ask me, or if they're having an issue with their dilemma, I always say, like, will you regret this when you're 55 or when you're 60 or 70? And if the answer is yes, then you need to do it. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your future self to at least try. So if you're looking to tell stories, you're looking to get into acting, and you know that it's there and it's burning in you, do it. Just jump in head first. Be prepared to make mistakes. Be prepared to look foolish. It won't last. Just do it and focus on the things that matter. That's one thing that I've kind of figured out in the last 8 years. And I have a lot left to figure out when it comes to this, but I was always concerned about other people's opinions of me. And when I'd get on set, if I did something wrong, like that person thinks I'm silly or that person thinks I'm an idiot or whatever. But I started just really putting all my effort into thinking, like, what do my kids think of me? What do my best friends think of me? What do my parents think of me? My ex-wife, the people I care about. If they think like, great job, you good, I'm proud of you, then what does it matter what this fucking strange person I don't know thinks? Like, maybe I do look like an idiot, but their opinion of me shouldn't matter to me. What should matter is the opinions of the people that I hold the closest. And if they support me, then I can go and make those mistakes. And I know that if I fall, I still have them. And really, that's all that matters in life. So that's kind of what I put all my effort into trying. Like, I still can't, like, I still feel that feeling of like, that person doesn't like me, or I look down to that person, or that was an awkward situation. I feel weird now. I wish I hadn't talked to that person because I feel silly, whatever. But trying to always remind myself, like, I want to do this. I'll regret it if I don't. Just do it. And if I make a mistake, just think about all the people that care about me that are behind me saying, do it. We love you. Keep working. And that's kind of my advice, would be just try to focus on that. And, you know, that little voice in your head, your ego saying, no, you can't do this. You know, try to silence them. It's harder, easier said than done, but yeah.
It's so hard because I think anybody in a performative career, I shouldn't make these broad generalizations. Maybe it's just you and I. But people are people pleasers, right? Like, because that's innately why we're telling stories, right? Is to please the people. I remember somebody once told me that, like, that's what an actor was like back in the day, was like to please the court, like to please the king, right? And you would bow because you were in service to the people.
Right.
And so, like, of course it hurts when even some random on the street is like, that was stupid and I didn't like your performance. You're like,
You've broken my heart.
The king didn't like my show. It's so innate in what performance is. But you're right, like, when so much of our industry is rejection, not just from, like, casting directors, but also from, like, society, like, how, I guess that explains the atrophy rate, like, why so many people drop out of this industry. But I guess this is a loaded question. Like, how else, I know I love the idea of remembering who's behind you, but do you have any other advice or what has worked for you when that's such a big part of just the world that we're in, is the rejection and the naysayers?
I don't know. You had mentioned, like, you know, maybe it's just us. Like, I don't know if it's something that I think when these things happen, these rejections happen, I get in like these weird funks where, like, I'll get depressed and be like, oh, fuck, I want to quit. I just want to quit. But then there's always something there that's like, are you kidding me? You're not going to quit? You're not a quitter. You can do this. You're going to quit over this, you little bitch. Like, it's almost this voice in my head that's kind of like the badass is like, don't be a little bitch. Like, you can do this. Just who gives a fuck? Just do it. And then you get kind of, for me, I don't know if this is everyone, but I get kind of worked up where I'm like, no, I'm not going to let this. I'm too stubborn to let this thing derail me. I can't now. I won't do it. But I go through the funk right away. And there's been times when I've sat there and, like, my ex-wife is my best friend, and I've called her when things have been really bad, and, you know, I'm on the phone, like, crying basically, and telling her, and then, you know, obviously there's that support of, like, you can do this, keep going, and that's great. But in the moment, you're like, nothing you can say is going to change the way I feel right now. I'm so down about what just happened. But there's always, like, a little voice of, like, you're not going to let this stop you. You're not a little bitch. I don't know how else to put it. Maybe I'm just tough on myself, or I have you know, the voice in my head is an asshole, but it's just, I don't know. I think maybe we all have that, maybe we don't, but don't have that conversation with yourself. And I think that's a big thing too, is spend time alone, get off your phone, spend time with yourself, ask yourself these questions, because that dialogue is important. You know, I might sound like I'm crazy, I have a voice in my head, but we all have that. I hope we all have that voice that kind of, we bounce things off of. And, like, it's important to have that dialogue, not look for external. Sometimes we have to go in, and, like, the validation has to come from within, because if it doesn't come from within, it's not as strong. Like, we need to love ourselves first. We need to, like, be proud of ourselves before someone else can be, because if we're against ourselves, we lose no matter what. So we have to have that dialogue, I guess. I don't know if that's just a thing for me, or if you're like that too, if you have that voice.
I agree with you. I think we all do, but we shut it out, because I think sometimes it can be, I don't even want to use the word harsh, but yeah, like somebody saying, stop being a little bitch, right? And if you don't have that innate, like, that confidence, or you haven't done that work on yourself, or you haven't spent time with yourself, like you said, hearing that can be like, no, that's mean, right? I don't want to hear it. I'm going to go back on my phone and
that's right.
Quiet, right?
Yeah.
But if you listen to it for long enough, again, I'm sure this doesn't work for everyone, but it's worked for me, and it sounds like it works for you. If you listen to it long enough, that's the empowerment. Like, that's the, like, hell yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, it's yeah, 100%, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're crazy.
Good,
I think we all have it. And if we don't, then it's just you and I with our little little voices.
Yeah, we'll tap into it, man. It'll be good, you know?
Well, and I think it's all about finding what works for you, right? And again, you'll never figure that out unless you do spend time with yourself. But if that doesn't work for you, and what works for you is the scroll on the Instagram and not being part of the real world. That's fine too, right? But I agree with you. I think, yeah, it's funny how the voice of the person in my head is just as aggressive as like random on the street saying you suck. It's like I'm such a competitive person that like, yeah, I'll go through the funk when somebody says like you suck, but then I'm so competitive with myself being like, I'll show you.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I have to show you now. Like I'm going to do this because I can't go without showing you, you know? Mm-hmm. I have to make this step because I'll regret not doing it, you know?
Yeah. Totally.
I think too, like the personality too is big. Like I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time by myself, talking to myself in my own head. So that definitely helped growing up. I already had that basis, that foundation. But there's some people that they're just not, they're not able to have that dialogue with themselves because of their upbringing or because of what has happened in their life. They just don't know how. And it's not easy to do. It really, you don't want to really, sometimes you don't want to dig deep because when you start opening doors in your mind, you're like, fuck, I want to leave that closed. Like, I don't want to go down that path. But I think if you want to get to a point where you feel comfortable in front of a camera or where you can rise up when something goes wrong, you need to go down those dark paths and like, here's what I've been through. Here's what I've survived. I've done all that. I can get through this. Like I went through all this stuff that happened in my past and it was really hard and I cried and it killed me, but I'm here. So if I can get through that, I can get through someone telling me I suck, you know, I think you got to visit those negative times and look through that cookie jar of wins. Like, what can I use here for some sort of confidence? I need it. I'll take it anywhere, or from anywhere, I should say. I think that's kind of an important thing to do. But again, it depends on personality, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was in an acting class recently, and the idea of, like, I need a thought was what was part of the acting class, right? Like, I'm in this emotional scene, and I can't quite get myself into it. And the acting teacher was like, I'm going to give you a thought. And would just say, you know, like, think in your head, I'm inept, you know, and like, or something like that. Like just having a thought coming into your head. And it comes from those past experiences that you can relate to that thought. I'm trying to make sure I'm making sense here. And I think what was very powerful for me was knowing that I've been through stuff, as we all have, but able to bring up those past experiences, relate them to the thought, and give emotion out. But then as soon as the scene was over, have the ability to say, cut.
Thought gone. Yeah.
Thought gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that you've had to work on? Like, I know that's part of the vulnerability piece, or like, just what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've heard, like, I definitely know that how to, like, not, I don't know how to do that, but I've heard of that, the idea of like substitution, mm-hmm. or like, okay, if I lost a child in this scene, well, now I could think of a thought of like maybe when my dog was sick and how mm-hmm. that made me feel, and then I could use that. But the hard part, I think, is, especially when you're on set, like, people don't realize, but you could be shooting a scene for hours. And you could be having to have that thought for hours. And then you shoot it once. It's like, okay, we're going to reset the camera for your coverage now. Don't lose that thought. Mm. You know, and you got to be able to. So I think, again, it's a balancing act of, like, having it, being able to tap into it, have it, use it. Okay, cut, let it go. Grab it again, use it, let it go. And that's kind of a really... Oh, man, that's the hard part about acting, is just being able to stay in that moment and keep that thought for hours sometimes. And mm-hmm. yeah, that's kind of my take on it, I guess, my thought on that.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it is being able to then safely remove yourself from it. Because I think, you know, we hear a lot about the types of acting training and how, like, method acting and stuff like that. And I think that comes, I think the ability to kind of take yourself out safely and not fall down into a deep, deep spiral that can happen when you're living in vulnerable, tricky thoughts for a 12-hour shoot. Mm-hmm. I think at least for me personally, that came with life experience. And kind of what you were saying, like I've been through stuff before and I was able to get out of it. So now I can use this to be in this scene for 12 hours, but then I know how to safely remove myself.
Yeah, that's right. Because you've been in that situation before, and like things get better. I can now focus on the good stuff as opposed to those negative thoughts or whatever it was that I'm tapping into. Yeah, but that again, that's the trick, right? Like some people can't. Like you look at guys like Heath Ledger who went right down that road. Like I'm going all the way, and then it went too far, and it can be dangerous, especially when it's a really tough scene. Like just for like a rape scene or something like that, where like especially if someone's dealing with a memory or some sort of trauma that's connected, it could be very difficult, and it could be pretty traumatizing to relive that. It's for the art, but no, like my soul's hurting now. Like I this was too much. So that's the hard part of acting, I guess, is to be able to get one foot in, one foot out, right?
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, but it's so rewarding because if you can go there and then get out, the feeling of power that you get from like I lived it, I got through it, I just gave it to you, and I came out of it, and I'm okay now. That's a win. You've now become the dominator of that thought, of that trauma. Like I own that now. You can't break. This won't break me. I've used it now to my will, so I own it now, which is another part that could be super healing, depending on the personality or depending on the work they've done,
Well, and then that just adds another W to the cookie jar, right? Like not just the acting win, but like the person win. Yeah. That's really interesting. I like that, like having power over. And I remember when, I had an acting class where I had a really intense scene, and I like dove into kind of some like sense memory and all that neat stuff. And I remember feeling kind of guilty for kind of bringing up some of these things that had happened in my life and using it to further my acting career. Being like, but then my acting teacher being like, yeah, but that's your lived experience. I'm like, yeah, but like, how dare I use it to like further my career? She's like, what?
How selfish.
How selfish.
Right.
It's almost like it's not fair because like other people don't have that advantage because they don't have the trauma that I'm able to bring up. And my acting teacher was just like, oh Lord. Like what
You're getting in your own head. Get out of your
head.
Yeah,
like it's not fair. Like Jenny over there can't use this tool. She's like, no, like that. It's not like it's a textbook that you've ripped pages out of so that you're competing against them. Now your classmate can't read it. That's not how it works. This isn't medical school.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other end too, Jenny has her own things that she could pull from. Maybe this is something that works well for you, but maybe Jenny, it's a different thing. Everyone has a superpower, which is cool because acting, like you are an individual. And your past trauma, what you do and the way you think is your tool bag. It's like no one else, which makes it kind of interesting because when you get into an audition and you give them exactly what they're looking for, they're like, we want you. We want that. Most of the time it's like, no, we don't want that. Move on. We want something different than you. But, it allows you to have your thing that no one can reproduce. You become so valuable because you are an original. You're unique,
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite on-set stories?
I don't know really. Like when I'm on set, I try to be as in the scene as I can, and as like at first I was going to say professional as I could be, but when you're on the same set with the same people for 3 weeks, by the end you're kind of silly. Like everyone, and it becomes kind of fun. So there was the one time when I poked Frank Arnault in the eye. That was like a traumatizing moment. It was my first scene, and I had poked the lead, and I was like, oh my God. But looking back, it was kind of funny because it was like, of course that's going to happen to me. Like, it's me. I'm going to do that. I'm an idiot. But there were moments on Armchair when Richard and I would just be kind of silly going over lines, and that was actually one thing that we did. We would go through lines, but we wouldn't say them we would just say the lines. However, if I wanted to have an accent, we would just run lines and we would say it however we wanted to, just to feel free to just, how does it feel coming out, you know? And that was really fun because it kind of took the seriousness out for a minute, but it was almost like a nice little warm up for when I was going to get in the moment, which was cool. But fun moment. I don't think I've been on enough sets to really have like a standout thing. Yeah, it was just fun to laugh and spend time with people and like-minded people, you know? Whereas like where I'm from, when I go to a job, especially when I was teaching, I always felt like kind of the outsider. I didn't fit in with the other teachers. I had friends, of course, and colleagues that I enjoyed talking to, but I always felt like I was like one of. I wasn't one of. I was kind of like the black sheep of the career, I guess. And being on set, you see your people. Like anyone you talk to is like, yeah, I play music. I have this pedal. I have that pedal too. Or yeah, I would love this series. Or like, you know, this. Everyone there, like the sound guy, the people in props, everyone has that same shared kind of love of the arts. So you just feel at home, which is something, especially the first 30 years of my life, I never really felt like I was with my people. So having that opportunity to be on a set and feel like, oh shit, this is it. Yeah, I feel comfortable. These people are they're into the same stuff as I am, and we could talk about the same stuff. That feels good. I'm not sure if it's a funny moment, but it's definitely another something I can put into my cookie jar. Like, that's a win. You're in the right place now. You have that feeling. Put that away. Look at that later when you need it.
How would your family, your loved ones, those people behind you who are pushing you, how would they describe what you do?
I think they think it's a hobby.
Yeah?
As much as, I left for 3 weeks to go to the Sioux, and I drove back every weekend, and I had to be there at a certain time, and I worked 12-hour days. But I think they still see it as he does some acting. Because I don't teach anymore. That's a whole other story that's a whole podcast. We can go down that road. So, when I was teaching, it was easy to be like, oh, he likes acting. He does that as the side thing. It's like a side gig. But now that I'm not doing anything but music and acting, I think people aren't, they're like, he's unemployed and he's an artist. But I try to tell them, like, no, I'm a full actor member. I have worked on professional projects. I'm an employed actor. Well, not at this moment, but I get auditions. And if I get that audition, which probably doesn't happen often, I'll be employed. So I think it's hard for anyone, though, to look at look at this, what we do, and think like, oh, that's a job. Because to them, a job is stable. You're always working. You have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Whereas this is like, here's a ton of money all at once, and now you're not going to work again for months. And I don't mind that at all. That's nice for me because I like trying different things and doing different stuff. But I think for everyone else, it's kind of like, what exactly is his job? He's just kind of like he's waiting. He's a contractor doing a bunch of different little things. Yeah. So, yeah.
Is there anything that you are looking forward to coming up?
I'm looking forward to 2023, and I have a whole plan of things that I want to do for my music. So I go by the stage name Dad Bod. And I've been releasing music videos and singles for 3 years now, consistently every couple of months. And I've taken on this new challenge of mixing my tunes as well. Before I would write the songs, produce them, and then send all of the stems to be mixed somewhere else. And I kind of decided this year I'm going to take that on myself and try to learn the ropes of how to be a mixing engineer and how to mix a project. So I'm excited to get that out to people. And I think it'll be a different vibe than the other stuff, because it'll just it's completely me getting this project off the ground, and I don't have help from anyone else, although that's kind of how I prefer to work, is collaboratively. But I'm excited to see how much I can learn and how well my mixes are going to be. And I'm also excited to write this script that I'm working on, and I've gotten some feedback from a writer that's in the industry already, and he's kind of going to mentor me and help me go draft by draft and build this thing into something that's pitchable, I guess, to a network. So I'm excited to work on that and get that nailed down and get that feedback and make myself like a legit pilot for a show. And just see what kind of auditions come down the pipe, and what kind of projects I could be a part of, and what kind of people I can meet. You meet some pretty cool people, especially like when you're into those big productions. You see people that you're like, I've watched you on TV. Like I grew up watching you. I saw 3 seasons of you. So that's pretty cool. I got to do a scene with Tim Rosen, who's from Schitt's Creek. He plays Mud Schitz. So I was like, whoa, like, dude, I saw you on Instant Star, and here I am talking to you about guitars. It's like, what the hell is happening? So I'm excited for the possibility of that kind of stuff. And it doesn't even matter if there's nothing concrete. It's just I know that like that will happen again. I know it, and I'm excited for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words of wisdom?
Oh, man. Not yet. I'm not old enough to have any words of wisdom. I'm still trying to learn myself. I don't know. I think when it comes to this, just do what makes you do what you, that voice in your head telling you to do something. If you're anything like me, it's not going to quiet down. It's just going to get louder, and you're going to have to do more and more to quiet it down and to stifle it. Just do it. If you love something, go try it. Even if it's going to be uncomfortable at first, just don't live in regret. Don't allow yourself to go down the path of so many other people where you look back when you're in your 80s going, man, I wish. And by then the time is gone. That's it. Time's up. Game's over soon. And I like to look at life kind of like a game. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I kind of just look at all these little challenges. Like, that's a level. I got to beat that level. Like, if I was playing Mario to get to the princess, I got to beat that level. It's not going to be easy. Obviously, it's going to be tough. So I just try to tell myself, like, you beat another level. That was a tough one, and just try to have conversations with yourself and, do whatever you have to do to get that thing that you're burning to get. Because I don't know what it would be like to look back and think, like, I didn't do it and now I wish I had. It would be heartbreaking.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Eric, for being my guest this week. I loved meeting you on set. It was pure joy working with you. You were such a generous scene partner. I cannot wait to see our scene come to life on the big screen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!